Shin Pei. And this we now be last week we of course began the study of Shemot, Sefer Shemot, and now we're going to talk about Parshat Vaeira. This week, of course, by the way, is Shabbat Mevarchim. This coming Monday, Amir Hashem, we will inaugurate Chodesh Shabbat, and hopefully that will be a siman tov l'chol Am Yisrael. All right, this evening what we're going to do is we're going to talk about arrogance and humility. Arrogance and humility. Now, I just want to see if I can get a larger view. There we are. Arrogance and humility. The Torah tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu was anav ma'od mikol adam asher al pnei hadama. The Torah testifies that of all the people who ever lived, Moshe Rabbeinu was anav ma'od. He was the most humble, more humble than anybody else who ever lived. Now, it's for us to determine, and we're going to explore this evening a bit about what humility is, but also we're going to talk about its opposite, which is arrogance, or one who is possessed of hubris, which is exaggerated pride. And here the Torah shows us in this week's Parsha, it dramatizes for us the clash of these two human personalities. First, on the one hand, you have Paro, who possesses arrogance and hubris and the belief that he can conquer all. As a matter of fact, in this week's Haftorah, taken from Sefer Yecheskel, the Torah says, Hashem says, Paro Melech Mitzrayim, Hatanim Agadol, the great serpent, Harovetz Betocha Ye'orav, who crouches in his river. The Ye'or is generally, almost always, means to say of Egypt. Asher Amar, that he said, Paro said, Li Ye'ori, the river is mine. Va'ani asitini, and I in fact made myself. So we see here, that he fashioned it, and that he tried he was trying to make other people believe something that he knew was not true, or after a while, when one repeats a lie over and over again, they begin to believe it. They can no longer tell the difference between reality and their own fantasy. But in either case, Moshe Rabbeinu is called after his long sojourn outside of Mitzrayim. He and Aaron were to confront Paro, the symbol of arrogance. And Moshe Rabbeinu, again, as we said, is the symbol of humility. Now, and he is, it appears, and the Torah seems to lead us to the idea that his primary mission is Lahotzi et b'nei Yisrael mitzrayim, to remove the Jews from Mitzrayim, to take them out, to cause them to be removed from Mitzrayim. But we're going to see now that there are some psukim that we have which seem somewhat to contradict this mission that Moshe Rabbeinu had. So I'll ask you first to turn to Chamishi, which would be Shemot Perek Chet, Pasuk Daled. We're going to now look at the second of the plagues, the plague of Dam, its introduction, and Moshe Rabbeinu's statement to Paro that unless Paro changes and allows the Jews to leave, he's going to bring the second of the 10 plagues. The first was Dam, and now Tzvardeya will come. Tzvardeya does, in fact, come, and we pick up the story here in Perek Chet, Pasuk Daled. Vayikra Paro leMoshe. Paro called to Moshe, Ula Aharon, both of them, Vayomer hatiru el Hashem. beseech God, v'yaser hatzvardiim mimeni umeami, and remove this plague of the frogs from me and from my nation. Va'ashalcha et ha'am, and I will release the people. Now, by the way, just parenthetically, the word lishloach in the kal form means to send, like to send messengers, to send a letter. But ashalach, which is in the PL form, means to release. I'll release them. That's Rav Hirsch that mentions that. I'll send it to them, let them go worship God. Vayomer Moshe leFaro. And Moshe now responds, and he says to Paro, Hitpa'er alai, a very strange phrase. Boast for me. Boast. Hitpa'er means to bring a certain sense of self-glorification. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, give it a try. Boast for me. L'matai atir lecha. When shall I request? Or when shall I designate your request? V'la'avadecha u'la'mecha la'achri tatzvardim, for you and your people, so that we will now sever this plague of frogs from you and from your house. Rak bayor yisha'arna. They'll just go into the river itself, and you'll be rid of them. You tell me, Paro, when do you want this to happen? Now, it does seem to be a strange request. Moshe Rabbeinu seems to be tempting Paro. Part of the issue here is Paro learned when it came to the plague of dam, of blood, that in fact, in the changing of the river and the rivers and the waters of Mitzrayim into blood, that Paro could see that indeed that God is capable of some manipulation of the physical world. But Moshe Rabbeinu wants to tell him it's not limited to that. God is above time and therefore not subject to time. God is infinite. He is not finite. God was, is, and always will be. And so therefore, when you designate for me what human beings call time, God is the master not only of space, but of time. And so he says, Lamachar, tomorrow, Paro says. Yomer and Moshe said, Ki devaracha, as you wish, as your word. Leman teda ki ein ka Hashem Elokeinu. Now we have the first of three, or actually four, unusual phrases. So that you shall know, ki ein ka Hashem Elokeinu, so that you shall know that there is none like our God. Now, we find a similar phrase, not exactly the same, right before Shishi, a few psukim later, in Perek Chet, Pasuk Yud Chet, where God removes the wild animals from the midst of the Egyptians, and of course it was causing them extraordinary fear. And God says in Perek Chet Yud Chet, Ve'ifleiti bayomahu, when I take them away, I am going to distinguish et Eretz Mitzrayim, separated. Asher ami omed aleha, which my people is in Mitzrayim. Leviltia yot shamarov, where the Jews are, there will be no wild animals. Leman teda, once again, that same phrase, Leman teda, that you should know, Ki ani Hashem b'kerev haaretz, that I am God in the midst of the land. That's the second of the four phrases that Moshe Rabbeinu seems to reiterate with a small variation at the end of not everybody, at the end of segments of Makot, of the plagues. Another example, the third and fourth come right before Shvi'i. And Moshe Rabbeinu now, again, at the close of the boils, the plague of boils, Moshe Rabbeinu says, all right, I will take them away, and I will, and in the name of God, he says, and And then he says, Ba'avur, why will I remove this plague? Ba'avur teida, that you should know, once again, you should know or admit, Ki ein kamoni b'chol haaretz. There is none like me in all the world. And Onkelos says, what does it mean there is none like me? Onkelos says, no one else governs or is capable of governing nature like God. Yes, we have a limited capacity to, we certainly know it with the current misery that the world is undergoing, and that is that we have a limited ability to control nature. And just when we think we've got it licked, we find out that we don't. Good lesson for us in general. And then, but you should know that I'm going to take away the boils from you, and you will know that there is none that can govern the natural world like I. And finally, as I do, two psukim later, right before Shvi, God says, I'm going to send the next set of plagues, and which we'll find in next week's parsha. He says, Ba'avur zot maticha, I have set you up, Paro, says Moshe Rabbeinu. I've set you up in the name of God. Ba'avur arotcha et kochi, to show you my strength. And then he says, Uleman saper shemi b'chol haaretz, that you should proclaim my reputation. Shemi means reputation here, not just the name, b'chol haaretz, in the world. So the last of these warnings and of these stipulations that Moshe brings to Paro is not just that you should know, but that that in order that my reputation, what I as God, the creator of the world, can do, will be now known to the entire world. Question, simple. We now have 4 statements that Moshe presents, and each of them is at the conclusion or at the introduction of a plague. Each of them is, with the exception of the last one, that Paro should know, L'man teda, that in order that you, Paro, should know whatever it is. You should know that there is none like me in the world. You should know that I am God in the midst of the land, of the earth. You should know that none rules as I can rule, and that you should, in order that you should proclaim my reputation in the world. That doesn't seem to be the job description of Moshe. That doesn't seem to be the mission. Clearly in Perek Gimel in chapter 3, it just says, "Lahotzi et ami b'nei Yisrael mi Mitzrayim." The purpose is to take the Jews out. What is this, what seemed to be a certain circumvention of the real mission? The mission is to take the Jews out of Mitzrayim. I would submit that slavery, and that was, the Jews were slaves, slavery is a symptom. The disease is arrogance. Because when people feel that they can own another human being, that they can mistreat another human being, or an entire group of human beings, and it doesn't matter whether the Jews are the ones who are suffering or anybody else, that involves a certain arrogance or a perversion in the order of this world in which we live. And once Paro can convince himself, and then perhaps, or convince others, and then even perhaps convince himself that he can create the Nile River, so then that naturally leads him to be able to subjugate other people. That's what the Torah is telling us. That the slavery itself, as I said before, that's the symptom. It's a terrible symptom, and it's one that must be eradicated. But it is a symptom. It can only come when one human being feels that they are superior to another human being, that they, in fact, have the right to dominate another human being or another group of humans. That's what had to leave first. First, Paro had to be broken down. First, he had to realize that, in fact, he is not a god. Then, once he realized that, that he's a human being subject to something far more powerful than he was, at that point and only at that point would he be willing to release the Jewish people. And so therefore, this entire episode here in Parshat Vaeira is intended through the Makot to break Paro's arrogance and to get him to submit and to agree that he's a human being, and no human being has the right to own and subjugate other human beings, certainly to make them suffer. Now, this idea of Ani Hashem Ein Kamoni, it starts by saying Ani, that you should know, Paro should know that when he mentioned in Parshat, in the Makkah of Dam, when Paro, the Makkah of Tzvardim, and it says, "Man teda ki ein ka Hashem Elokeinu," that you should know that there is none like our God. He's talking, and a person can say something to another person, and when it enters their ears and becomes processed by that person, they can process it quite differently than the person who is uttering the words. And here we see when Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Ki ein ka Hashem Elokeinu," it means that in the universe, there is none like God. God is fundamentally different from every other entity which exists in the world. He brought the world into being. He is separate from everything else. And ein ka Hashem Elokeinu. And there is none like our God. But when you look at the second, there is no entity or being like our God. But when you look at the second statement of Moshe Rabbeinu, when he says, Laman Teda, that you should know, Ki ani Hashem b'keref haaretz, speaking in the name of God, he says, you should know that I am God b'keref haaretz, in the midst of the land. Now, there is a difference between the deistic view of God and the personal view of God. The deistic view of God is that this creator created the world, looks from above, and has virtually nothing to do and virtually no interest in that which happens in the world. That's the first thing that Paro erred in, and that is the idea that there is a creator. But to say that there is a creator does not necessarily mean that that creator is concerned for the welfare of other human beings, of the human beings or anything here on this earth. And so therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu says in his second statement, "L'man teda ki ani Hashem b'keref haaretz." I am not just the God who is Ram al kol goyim, who stands far above everything else in this world. It would almost be like, for example, if as human beings, we really don't spend a lot of time worrying about individual ants that we may trample along the way, or small little insects. We walk and that's it. It doesn't interest us. So that was the ancient view of the world, at least one ancient view of the world. And of course, it has to do also with a certain deistic view. God is creator, and God steps back and is unconcerned. So when Moshe Rabbeinu says, Ani Hashem b'keref haaretz, Rashi mentions specifically, Shchinati lamala, my Shchinah, my abode, so to speak, is in the heavens, but I am also here on earth. He says, Gezerati mitkayemet b'tachtonim. My desires, my wills, my proclamations, they apply here. So Moshe Rabbeinu now, again, in the name of God, is breaking down Paro's exaggerated view of himself and his worth, which led to this to begin with. Now, if I may, I'd like to be able to spend some time talking about the Jewish view of what an anav is and what gava is. Well, we already talked about Paro's gava. The fact that he actually either believed himself or wanted others to believe that he could create the Nile, that in itself is the ultimate of arrogance, or one of the prime examples of arrogance. There is, though, the opposite of that, and that's Moshe Rabbeinu, Anav Mikol Adam. Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the most humble of men. Now, what is the Jewish definition of Anav? What is the Jewish definition of a person whom we would say is humble? It's not a matter. A lot of times we say he's very humble, and we tend to say he doesn't realize how great he is. Not necessarily true. Or he's very humble and he says, oh, somebody else can do it. It's not. Now, it's true. Moshe Rabbeinu said that to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But even so, certainly by the time he accepted the mission, he no longer denigrated his own worth and his own value. I want to read with you now the definition of being of anava, of humility, that's given to us by Moshe Chaim Luzzatto in the Silat Yesharim, the classic Musar Sefer, the classic Sefer teaching us self-discipline as to how we can live our lives. That's basically what Musar is. Musar does not mean criticism. Musar means the self-discipline that a person needs in order to live a truly meaningful life. So he writes as follows. He says, the truth is there is no room in a person's life for gava, and that would be for pride or self-importance. He calls it hitnasut, self-elevation. Because he says anybody who has any understanding or knowledge knows that if he's intelligent, he says he knows, if let's say a person is intelligent, knows or should know that the intelligence is merely the way that he can function best in this world. Example, he says, take a bird that flies. A bird's chok, its nature in the world is to fly. Humans don't have that quality. We can't fly by ourselves. We of course have just sent up a satellite that will go and take pictures of billions of years in the past. That's true, but it doesn't. But nevertheless, we ourselves cannot fly. So, but we do use our intelligence. We can do that. Send this this explorer to see what the world looked like at some point. So he says God gives to each and every creation its ability and its capacity to function within the world. The bird, for example, can fly. He says an ox can pull great loads, and it's only because of their nature. He says the same thing applies when a person is, let's say, very intelligent. His job is now to use that intelligence to make those around him better. He says it explicitly. He says, Im kain, ein kan litnaseu litkabod. If indeed each of the traits and characteristics that we have, there is no reason for us to be arrogant, that I sing better than someone else, or that I run faster than someone else, or that I grasp concepts better than someone else, or that I know music or art better than others. Why? He says, Ela im yesh bo chochma rabba, hine hu mechuyav lelamda. If somebody is very intelligent, so now it obligates them to teach others, to help them be able to solve their problems. And like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, Im lamata Torah harbe, al tachzik tova latzmecha. If you've learned a great deal of Torah, don't ascribe to yourself a certain amount of greatness. And here's what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says. Why? It's in Pirkei Avot. Ki lakach nutzart. That's why you were created. If you have a beautiful voice, you were created for that. If you have if you have artistic quality, you were created for that. Great intelligence, you were created for that. And I mentioned this before, that I try to tell my students, you weren't created to go to Harvard, no matter how smart you were. That doesn't mean you don't go to Harvard. It means that that's not the reason you were created. Once you confuse the instrument or the means with the end, then that's the downfall of a person. Universities, medals, and competition, all of those, and those abilities that people have to be able to succeed in those areas, those are instruments. They are means to the end. If you can run fast or you have a wonderful personality, then that's the way you make the world better. Don't confuse the two. That's arrogance. Arrogance is when a person confuses ends and means. A beautiful voice, a wonderful, an ability to do mathematics, a person who has great business acumen, those are all means to an end, not an end in itself. They are a means to make the world better, a means to make the people around them happier and to benefit them. And so therefore says Moshe Chaim Luzzatto in Mesilat Yesharim, he says, if a person is wealthy, has a lot of money, yismach b'chelko, he does a little play on the words, let him be happy with his lot. Why? Because now he can help others. So now, what is, according to Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, we have no reason to contend with that, it is humility is the recognition that the gifts that you have came from God, and those gifts are a means to an end, not an end in itself. And therefore, what is the end? The end is for each human being to make the world better. Not the whole world, doesn't have to be the whole world, the world around her, the world around him better. And if that's the case, if you do it by singing, by musical talent, by art, by intellect, by Torah learning, of course, all right, then, and you realize where it comes from and you use it for that purpose, you now can qualify as an Anav. Maybe not like Moshe Rabbeinu, but we qualify as an Anav. I'd like to conclude with a story that it's a Gemara in Tanit. It's learning Tanit. It's a Gemara in Tanit. And it's a story about arrogance. Masa Shabbat Rebbe Elazar Reb Shimon. There's a story where Rebbe Elazar, the son of Reb Shimon, came. He was very happy, and he because he had just come from learning from his Rebbe. He had spent apparently a significant amount of time there, and he learned, and he was, as we say, on cloud nine. He was very happy with himself. And the Gemara says, Libo Gaspo, that Daito Gas Alav, that the way he thought about himself was not that of an Anav. He was he was prideful. Now, again, when a person learns Torah, certainly there's no reason not to have a certain degree of pride. But in this case, his pride overcame his humility. Mipnei shalamad Torah harbe. He learned very much. And then he saw a man who apparently his appearance was very, the Hebrew word is mechoar, ugly. He sees this man on his way home, and he says to the man, mechoar biyoter, exceptionally unattractive. We can even say exceptionally ugly. Omar lo, so Rabbi Elazar said, so the man said to Rabbi Elazar, Shalom alecha, Rabbi. I know who you are. It's nice to see you. And Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, in his current state, didn't answer him. Omar lo, Reika. He answered him, but he didn't give him shalom. Omar lo, Reika. Kama mechoar also ish. Wow. This man is very ugly. Is everybody in your town that ugly? You imagine this? You imagine anybody saying, and this is one of the great scholars of Torah, a great human being, uncontested. And he said this to this man. Amar lo, eini yodea. Said the man, I don't know. Ela lech ve'amor le'uman she'asa'ani. If you want to know whether everybody in my town is that way, or you want to know why I'm so physically unattractive, go to the one who created me. He created me. So what do you want? And then ask him why. Why is this person so ugly? It hit Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon like a thunderbolt. He was a great man, Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. But his arrogance for that moment, however temporary and momentary it was, caused him to cause another human being exceptional pain. So he got off the donkey. He was riding home. He got off, and he bowed down. Rabbi Elazar literally prostrated himself on the ground. Mecholi, I beseech you, forgive me for what I did. Amarlo, Eini mochalach. I'm not going to forgive you. Ad shetelech le'uman she'asani. Until you go back to the artisan who created me. Ve'amorlo kamam choar klizeh. Tell him how ugly his creation is. So when they finally, and this dialogue and interaction went on until they finally get to the town where Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon was ready to go to, and he said, and the people came out to greet him because we're talking about a Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. We're talking about a very great man who was the son of a very great man. They went out to greet him and they gave him shalom. They said, Shalom alecha, Rabbi. Rabbi Mori, not just Rabbi, but our the great one and the teacher, our teacher, Amar Lahem, Me'atem Koren Rabbi. So the ugly man said to him, who are you calling teacher? Amrulo, they said to him, the one who is walking after you. Amar Lahem, Imzeh Rabbi al Yirbu Kamoto B'Yisrael. If this is a Rebbe, if this is your idea of a teacher, may there not be more like him in the world. Now, in the end, they said to him, even so, please forgive him. Okay? Macholo sha'adam gadol b'Torah. He is a person who's much learned in Torah. Amar lahem b'shvilchem hareini mochelo. I'm going to, I am, because of you, townspeople, I'm going to forgive him. That he shouldn't do this again. Remarkable story. We could probably spend an hour talking about each of the characters, the townspeople, Rabbi Elazar, Reb Shimon himself, and the ugly man. But it's interesting, and this will conclude in just 1 minute. The Marsha wants to know, what kind of story is this? He says, first of all, he says, what kind of questions Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon asked the ugly man? Is everybody in the town ugly like you? What, ugly's catching? It's not, right? So it's not that. Therefore, the Marsha says he's not talking about one man. He believed that this person's skin was very dark, and he may have come from Ethiopia. And therefore he asks, is everybody? And he considered that to be ugly. He considered that to be ugly. Doesn't mean it is, but that's what he considered it. And so therefore he said, is everybody ugly like you in your town? And then the ugly man replied that, you know what? Go to the one who created me. Natata chisaron bivriya. You, this Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, you have ascribed to God a faulty creation. For that's almost unforgivable. So when we call another person a name, or we belittle another group, or we engage in racial epithets or other things, we are guilty of what the Marsha says, natata chisaron bivriya. We are ascribing to the Creator himself a fault. So we as Jews have to be very careful as to how we talk. Of course, there are people who may bother us. Of course, it can happen, right? But the whole idea of taking entire blocks of people and ascribing to them a negative trait, whether it's physical, whether it's intellectual, whether it's artistic, whatever it may be, when we do that, we ascribe to God a faulty. We'll conclude now with a statement by Rabbi Jonathan B. Sachs. We're going to come back to Pharaoh, and with this we'll conclude. He says everyone has free will. All human beings have free will. But watch what he says about Pharaoh. Pharaoh was born free, but became his own slave. Moshe was born into a nation of slaves, but led them to freedom. It is our ability to make good choices, and it is our willingness to be humble, to recognize that what we have and where it came from is from the Creator of the universe. When that happens, we can be liberated from our own tendencies to entrap ourselves. And by doing that, we can go, as Moshe Rabbeinu did, from being born into a slave society to freeing himself and that society. All right, everyone. I want to wish everybody Shabbat Shalom and Emir Hashem. This Shabbos is Shabbos Mavorchim, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody, or at least talking to everybody at one point or another. All the very best.
Rabbi, thank you so much.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Good
maybe.
Shabbos.
Good to see
Thank you,
you.
Rabbi.
Thank you.
All the
Bye,
best.
everyone.
Rabbi Myers,
Yes,
I have a question.
yes.
So
Yes.
that's a very strong statement that you said, that in order to enslave another group of people, you have to be arrogant. But we have slavery in the Chumash.
Yes, yes, but we don't have it now. At one point,
No.
slavery was so pervasive in the world that in fact, the only way to eradicate it was to regulate it. And so therefore, in fact, it was regulated, absolutely. But now it's unthinkable for us to make slaves of anybody because the world has progressed much better. Not the entire world, but the world has progressed. So no one can enslave another person today. Okay. Other
Okay.
questions? Other
Okay,
questions?
thank you.
All right. Yes. All right, everyone.
Thank you. Good Shabbos.
Have a great Shabbos, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye.